Hello everybody and welcome to the University of Huddersfield Journey to Net Zero, a panel event. Today we have a fantastic panel joining us to introduce the new carbon neutral strategy, a 10-point plan for the planet.
Our panelists today are Professor Tim Thornton, our Deputy Vice-Chancellor. Tim is a Fellow of the Royal Historical Society and a Principal Fellow of the Higher Education Academy. He's also General Editor of the Chatham Society, one of the oldest history publishing societies in Britain, founded in 1843. Tim chairs the Climate Emergency Steering Group and will lead on the sustainability agenda at the university.
And Professor Jane Owen-Lynch, who's a Pro Vice-Chancellor Teaching and Learning. Jane has a distinctive multidisciplinary portfolio of research activity based in biochemistry, but spanning across collaborations in physics, psychology and biology. Jane will work to ensure that sustainability is embedded at the heart of the curriculum at the university.
Next is Dr. Phil Hwang, who is a reader in physical geography. Dr. Phil Hwang received a PhD in geophysics and remote sensing from the University of Manitoba, Canada. Working as a reader in physical geography, he studies the impact of climate change in the Arctic and African countries. As Phil has participated in more than 10 Arctic expeditions, he witnessed dramatic changes happening in the Arctic and is working with world-leading scientists to gain a better understanding of changing Arctic sea ice in the context of global climate change. He also studies environmental changes occurring in forests and wetlands in Africa and their impact on communities and livelihoods due to climate change.
We also have Patrick Flavin, who's the Carbon and Energy Reduction Officer. So Patrick manages sustainability and energy management in the Estates and Facilities Directorate, delivering the university's sustainability and wellbeing objectives in our estates and supporting delivery in the university's wider operations. A committed environmentalist, Patrick is using his ongoing MBA degree to identify how actions to combat the climate emergency may become business as usual. So I'm Bethany, the Community Officer at Huddersfield Students' Union. In my first year, I founded the Vegan Vegetarian Society, and I've always taken a personal interest in sustainability. As well as environmental issues, I also represent students on accommodation and local issues. So I'll now hand over to Adrtayo to introduce himself.
I am Adrtayo. I am the president of Huddersfield Students' Union. I first became involved with the Students' Union in my role as an academic rep in the Academic Law Society, and I also held the position of Equalities Officer in year 2019-2020 academic year. I was then elected as a Students' Union in 2020, and I'm the leader of the exec team in the union. I represent all Huddersfield Students' Union at all levels. Just before we begin, please feel free to use the Q&A box throughout the event to chat to each other or to ask panel questions. We'll answer any questions later in the event.
You can also engage with us on Slido throughout the event using the hashtag HUDUniNetZero to tell us your thoughts on sustainability at the university. We will look over the results of this shortly. We'll now go over to Professor Tim Thornton, Vice-Chancellor at the university, for his welcome speech.
Many thanks, Adrtayo, and many thanks, Bethany. Today, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to our panel event on the University of Huddersfield's journey to net zero as part of our Green Week. Here at Huddersfield, we're proud of the commitment we've made towards achieving carbon neutrality. This is focused on our carbon neutral strategy, a 10-point plan for the planet. As part of this plan, the university has set ambitious targets of net zero carbon emissions for Scope 1 and Scope 2 by 2030 and for Scope 3 by 2045. The plan was adopted in 2020 and we're already making good progress, having met and exceeded our carbon reduction targets for Scope 1 and for Scope 2 last year. It's important to note that there was very strong appetite for the 10-point plan from students and staff across the institution, and it was approved by the University Council in 2020. The plan is a bold one, in line with our bold strategy map towards 2025 and aligned with its goals and values. And it contains some truly distinctive aspects that show our commitment to achieving carbon neutrality in a way that engages with everybody at the university. As you'd expect, any new buildings at the university will conform to high standards. The National Health Innovation Campus, recently announced for Southgate, with a first building opening for September 2024, will be built to the WELL building standard, which we've now committed to for the first time. But it's not just about new buildings or building refurbishments hitting the environmental standards that we want. We'll be making specific capital interventions that will help us along the path towards carbon neutrality, and we'll be spending £1 million to help us with these over the next 6 years. So we're currently installing around 500 photovoltaic solar panels on the roof of the technology building, the largest area of flat roof space on campus. This is the kind of major project that £1 million will be spent on over the next 6 years. The fund allows us to accelerate our progress, and we're confident that we can deliver the required reductions in carbon so that we hit Scope 1 and 2 in 2030. However, our plan is not just about how we consume energy. We're also making major commitments towards carbon offsetting that will be performed in a responsible way and which will engage with everybody at the university. Offsetting is often done in a way that's remote, but we're keen that our offsetting is relevant to all of the university's communities. We've committed to discussions with the White Rose Forest Partnership to ensure that we're part of tree planting in the locality, and to add a personal connection when a student joins us, that a tree is planted in their name, an idea of the Vice-Chancellor himself, and something that exemplifies the way this mission runs right through the work of everyone in the institution. It also addresses the sense of powerlessness and distance that some of us can occasionally feel on some of these issues. Being part of a large organisation, it's important to still see that what we're doing, all of us collectively, is really having a specific impact. Along similar lines, we're working on joining local efforts to restore the peatlands that are a vital carbon store on the moors right on the university's doorstep. When we see the moors burning like they did in 2019, it brings home the reality of environmental crisis to students and staff that live locally or travel around the area to study or work here. And it's a crisis that we can help to address. We're also considering the impact of our approach to education and research here at the university. Otherwise, it may be that our actions, assumptions and cultures continue to create the problems which we're trying to address. So the 10-point plan is very much about us as people, as well as things like buildings. So environmental education is an important part of our Global Professional Award, which all our undergraduate students take. It means that all our undergrads engage with the issues which we're all facing during the time that they're developing as engineers or designers, historians or pharmacists. It's an unusual thing for a university to do, but it shows that as an institution, as staff or students, we're thinking of the implications for our futures as global professionals. There's much more that I can say about the document and about the work that's being done and will be done, but I must briefly thank too everybody who's contributed so far, especially students, well represented here by those who've helped to put together the week's activities, and the student union, especially Bethany and the executive community officer, and to wish all involved a successful week. Thank you very much.
Sustainability starts with us. The student union takes an active role in the conservation of our planet, from changing our disposable cups to reusable mugs, hosting sustainability workshops, and attending the climate strike. Now more than ever, we need to take responsibility of our actions and work together in partnership with the university to create a better world for our global professionals. As president, I'm proud to share that we have recently updated our sustainability policy to ensure that our department within the student union does their bit. This is a joint effort and everybody has to play their part. Bethany, our community officer, has been working closely with the university sustainability team, but also with the students to ensure we are representing their voices.
In the last 2 years, my role as community officer has heavily focused on sustainability and the local community. Students are passionate about protecting our earth, but understand that both individuals and businesses need to take responsibility. In October 2019, a student proposed a big idea to get the university to take the climate emergency seriously. Since then, I've been sat on the Climate Emergency Steering Group, in which we've been working on the 10-point plan. It was emphasised that any declaration that is made has to be backed up by meaningful action. Now that the university has committed to go climate neutral, the work doesn't stop here. Sustainability will be ingrained within the community officer's role, meaning the legacy of the students' work over the past few years will be the foundation for future change. We will continue to work on this important issue by actioning, educating and campaigning for our planet's future. I'm excited to see the developments on campus and working collaboratively with students to make real, long-lasting change. We had a wide variety of interesting questions submitted in advance that we decided to pre-record some of our answers to ensure that we can answer as many as possible. We're going to play this for you now, but we're still here and we'll be back with you afterwards in around 20 minutes to answer any further questions you have live. Please also submit your questions and comments in the Q&A box as this is playing, and we'll aim to respond to as many of these as possible.
My question is to Phil. Phil, having dedicated your research to understanding the effect of the climate change in the Arctic, can you tell us the importance of addressing the climate emergency?
Okay, thank you for the question. And in my opinion, when we addressing the climate emergency, and I think communication on scientific finding, and then increasing awareness on climate change is very important. So, for example, the climate scientists project about 0.5 meter to 1 meter sea level rise in this century. So that's from the gradual melting of mountain glaciers and then Greenland ice. However, there's some frightening news about the instability of Antarctic ice, which is in recent study actually suggests about 60% of the Antarctic ice sheet shows signs of the instability called the hydrofracture. So what it suggests this kind of hydrofracture actually only getting worse under the high emission scenarios, and then potentially leading to complete collapse or the break of the Antarctic ice. So for example, if the Western Antarctic ice sheet collapse, then we're expecting about 3 meter sea level rise on top of the expected sea level rise. So we're talking about almost 600 million people talking about, which is about 10 times of UK population. And this is a really frightening consequence we are maybe facing in the future. And then the question is when this will happen. And this is not only just one example. What about the permafrost in the Arctic? It's a ticking bomb. If it releases the carbon and methane emissions, will easily add up about 4 or 6 years of carbon and methane emission into the air. So that's why it's really important we communicate and debate on this kind of recent scientific findings, and then the consequence of the society. So that's why I think that's why we need to increase awareness like this kind of event, and then we need to a little bit talk about the climate emergency in the case. Yeah.
Thank you, Phil. I'll pass on to Beth now. Beth.
Many people will be aware of the new solar panel project on campus, so this question is for Patrick. Please can you tell us how campus buildings are currently powered and heated, and how the new solar panel project will fit into the existing network? Are there also further plans to incorporate more renewables on campus?
All right, thanks, Bethany. We mostly use gas boilers for heating our buildings. However, our newer buildings make extensive use of air source heat pumps for heating and cooling. We mostly rely on the national grid for our electricity, and will do so for the foreseeable future. The solar PV project, whilst highly visible, is only one piece in the jigsaw of how we will have to reduce our direct carbon footprint going forward. We need to continue reducing the amount of energy we need to use. We've made great strides in recent years to reduce our need for energy, mostly hidden behind the scenes in how we heat, ventilate and light our buildings. The challenge will be on how we decarbonise the operation of our existing buildings, which were mostly designed at a time when fossil fuels were cheap and climate change was a discussion around the fringes. It's not an economic decision either. In some cases, the technology isn't suitable to meet our needs at the moment. However, with impending changes in legislation to shift the country away from burning fossil fuels, plus the changing mindsets and mainstreaming of the climate emergency into day-to-day operations, the demand for the technology will catch up and should exceed our expectations in what we can achieve. We also need to look at improving the thermal performance of our older buildings. This is a major challenge on our campus, especially as we've got 2 deconsecrated churches and 3 old mills, all of which have got thick solid walls and take a lot of heating. My main hope is that the solar PV project will be the first of many on campus, but we're also going to be doing the hidden projects behind the scenes as well, continuing. So if you don't see any more PV for a while, it's because we're still going to be doing all the things like changing boilers, changing lights, changing heating controls to reduce our direct emissions.
Thank you so much. Hand over to Adrtayo.
Thank you, Bethany. Looking at scope 3 more closely, we would like to ask team if the university are planning to work closely with other stakeholders to both achieve their goal and encourage others to see their own. Examples are like the student accommodation companies, the major suppliers, and the council.
Thanks, Teo. Yes, is the short answer. We're already making a big difference in work with suppliers, as our decision to move from on-premise data centers to cloud computing with Microsoft Azure shows. Not only does cloud computing deliver that element of critical infrastructure more efficiently, Microsoft's commitment to carbon neutrality means we're working with a corporation which is committed to carbon negativity by 2030, and which is intending to remove more carbon from the environment than they've emitted since their foundation by 2050. And then looking at other major partners in the district and region, you're probably aware we're currently working on our civic university agreement, which we're intending to sign with the council this year and with others in following months. And this has 3 headline areas of work, one of which is around the net zero agenda. And this is because we know we can't make real progress on scope 3 alone. We need to work with partners like the White Rose Forest Partnership. And on that area specifically, it's our intention that carbon offset is local and through local tree planting and peatland restoration.
Thank you, team. I'll pass on to Beth now for the next question.
So, Jane, how can students expect to learn about sustainable development during their time at university?
Thank you, Bethany. I think that's a really good question because obviously we as an institution can do all we can on the climate change agenda, but we also want to be sending our students out into society and with knowledge of these things. I think there are areas, obviously, Phil is teaching one in geography, where this sort of topic occurs naturally within the curriculum. But I think what we're doing with the Global Professional Award is trying to make it such that all of our students actually have knowledge of this. So the Global Professional Award is around teaching students about well-being, about the global sustainability goals, and also resilience and all of the employability skills that they'll need in the future. So in the first year, then students are introduced to these sustainability and all that actually entails. And then in the second year, although it's not discussed overtly, there's lots of work around health and well-being, economic growth in a sustainable way, and industry and innovation. And then you yourself, actually, in terms of the development of the final year of this programme, are looking at putting in a more sustainable content. So effectively, the largest chunk of sustainability content in the curriculum will be given to the final years, as the last part of the GPA before they actually leave us and go out into employment and the wider society. So I think because the GPA is something that all students have to take, then we're effectively targeting all students through this mechanism.
Phil, could you expand on how this has already been achieved in the School of Applied Sciences?
Yes, as Jane said, the applied science achieving this already because geography is the already runs through this kind of topics. So, for example, we have various modules we're teaching for undergraduate, and some actually directly relate to the sustainable development topics, and some, but almost all modules in geography actually has these kind of topics of the sustainable development and climate change when they design the modules. And some example including like a sustainability module in first year. Actually, that module completely based on the different aspect of sustainable development, from the how to define, and then the how to measure, and then how to understanding these different dimensions like mobility and food, like that. And also we have various human and physical geography kind of modules, actually all talking about in parts like sustainability and then climate change, and then also the sustainable management for the different environment like river and mountain environment, like that.
Thank you so much for your answers, Jane and Phil. I'm going to hand back to Adrtayo.
Thank you, Beth. My next question is for both Tim and Patrick. How are previous developments such as Barbara Airport and Osler informing the new development on the old sports center site, and where can we find more about the building standards and sustainability considerations that are being incorporated in the project?
Thanks, Tayo. Perhaps if I start off and then I'll hand over to Patrick. The university has developed a strong reputation for the sustainable approach that it takes to the development of its buildings and facilities, seen in recent work of the kind that you've described in Osler, in Joseph Priestley East, and in the Barbara Hepworth buildings. Many of you will know, having worked or studied there, that this has been based on adopting the BREEAM Excellent standard. And it's been widely recognised outside the university too, with shortlistings for Osler and Barbara Hepworth buildings in the Times Higher Awards, and recently a remarkable win for the Barbara Hepworth building in the Constructing Excellence Awards, ahead of a very strong competition from the likes of the Deloitte headquarters, 1 New Street Square in the City of London, and the new BBC Wales headquarters in Cardiff. We've recently decided to adopt the WELL building standard, and we'll be using that for the new National Health Innovation Campus. That's the development at Southgate, the one on the old sports centre site that I think you're referring to. Patrick's one of the people that's involved in that, and I think he's best placed to explain a little bit more. So I'll hand over to Patrick at this point.
Okay, thanks, Tim. The WELL building standard is a relatively new concept in the UK, and it's all about the design and operation of the building enhances the user's well-being. The requirements are all based upon peer-reviewed scientific principles, such as access to daylight, thermal comfort, and high air quality, just to name a few. We're also incorporating increased biophilia in the design. This isn't just putting a few potted plants about the building, it's about creating a subconscious connection to nature in the use of construction materials and textile patterns. It's been proven to help building users relieve and manage stress better, and it's been incorporated into healthcare buildings across the globe. We've learned from building and operating our previous projects to move ever closer to our target of a net zero building. The bidders designing the building at the moment and the school are excited about the challenge, as are we in Estates. And we're also looking towards the whole life of this building, from the embodied carbon in its construction to reducing its emissions in operation and maintenance. We're undergoing a commercial competition at the moment for the design of this first building on the new Health and Wellbeing Academy on the new campus. but we'll publish more information soon on what we've got up our sleeve. Our aim is for this to be, a new exemplary building for both the university and for Huddersfield, but it'll only be the new exemplary building until the next project starts on that campus.
Thank you, Tim and Patrick, for answering those questions. I'll pass on back to Beth for the next question.
So back on the theme of Scope 3, Jane, could you tell us what infrastructure plans there are for campus with regards to transport and how this will benefit staff and students who commute to campus?
That's an interesting question in this time, isn't it, Bethany? We've effectively cut down our travelling to and from campus quite considerably, not by choice, over the last year. I think one of the things that we've learned from this year is that we can do quite a bit online. So that will effectively allow us to deliver some sessions online, which will cut down on commuting to and from campus. We have had discussions previously with some of the transport companies around how we can facilitate easier access to campus in a more sort of sustained way. So without having to have sort of buses and trains with very few students on them. I think probably the biggest thing moving forward is going to be issues around timetabling. So if we can allow students to come onto campus for concentrated blocks of time, it might mean, for example, that we could cut down commuter time by 1 or 2 journeys every week for the students going forward. But that's all part of our planning for the future teaching from September onwards, and we can look at how that develops. But obviously at the moment, discussions with the sort of commuting infrastructure in the local environment is not really appropriate, but we'll pick up those talks at a later point.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jane. Back to you, Adrtayo.
Thank you, Beth. To round us up now, I would like to ask each one of our panel members questions. Very quickly, could you also suggest how the university contribution to social and cultural sustainability might be put forward through the 10 point?
Okay, thanks, Teo. Just to start off very quickly, on the National Health Innovation Campus, I think it's important just to remind colleagues, students, this is a major initiative to develop a campus on the Southgate site, close to the existing Queensgate campus at the junction of Leeds Road and the Ring Road at Southgate, in a key strategic location close to the rail and bus stations. It's going to provide a step change investment in workforce development for health and social care, for the delivery of health, well-being and inclusion outcomes, in partnership working with organisations in the health service and beyond, in research and innovation, and in regeneration outcomes for the region. Now, of course, our School of Human and Health Sciences is already a leader, for example, with the largest workforce development contract for the NHS in Yorkshire and the Humber, supporting the largest group of apprentices in the region. But when you consider that, for example, Yorkshire and the Humber is top of the National League for obesity, you can see the opportunity and the challenge for this university working with its fantastic partners through this massive investment. It really is very exciting. It's a very important project for all of us to be involved in.
Okay, so just on the education side, I think to sort of use a very well used phrase, it's education, 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 because effectively what we will be doing is we'll be equipping all of our students with knowledge of this agenda. And I know that sounds quite easy to do, but actually in a curriculum sense, it's not. So I think the development that we've had over the last 2 years of things like the Global Professional Award, the fact that we're actually going to be, giving this message out there to all of our students as they leave us and go on into employment is going to be vital in just not only the local environment, but nationally as to wherever those students end up in future employment. I also think it's quite important that actually it's included, this type of agenda is actually included in the skills, the general skills that we're giving them. So it's part of that profile. It's not something different and something add-on. It's actually part of their total employability general skills profile that they'll go out there and represent us on this agenda. Thank you.
Okay, in terms of research, I think there are wide range of research taking place in the university. However, I just want to share about some examples I'm directly involved in the research. And I'm working with the business school on two research projects, one in Ethiopia and one in Malay. And in that project, we actually try to understand the sustainable development in a key resource in the country, like a forest and wetland, and try to achieve the sustainable management and development goals there. But in terms of the contribution to 10 points we're talking about, I think in that project, we implementing a concept of remote fieldwork, which is a new concept. Normally, we go to the country, we conducting fieldwork together with the local people. But in this case, we have a local university and NGO staff. They're working for us with the local government and farmers. In this way, we significantly cut our travel to the country from UK, and also it also helped the capacity building in the country, and also the increase the awareness for need for the sustainable development among the communities. They can see more importance why they're doing that and things like that. And also another project we working on is with the Home Valley Parish Council, and then working with the local consultant and farmers, local farmers. And actually in that project, I'm actually contributing my time and my expertise for addressing the sustainable development in a local area. So this is a kind of important. We actually giving our time and expertise for that kind of topics. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, and then I'll finish up. And in looking at biodiversity, there's two areas where really we can contribute to this. One is on campus itself, and one is outside in the wider area. On campus, we're looking at what we already have in place. So things like the woodland area down by the canal, what planting we've got, some of the green routes we've got, looking at how we can enhance those areas. Also looking at where we've got biodiversity deserts on campus, so where we might have some planting that was designed originally for aesthetic appeal rather than that's got any benefit for the wildlife, insects as such. What our aim is to do is to combine this with the wellbeing work, so that our campus is a lovely place to spend some time, basically, that we can increase the amount of areas where staff, students, visitors to campus can go dwell, relax in between lectures, relax between the work, so that they've got that kind of amenity space outside in the student realm that is enticing for people to go spend time. But also you are surrounded by native species, insects, birds, bees that benefiting the wider area. In terms of that wider area as well, our aim is that our biodiversity work will link up with what's on our doorstep along the river corridors and along the canal, but also with the work we're doing in what offsets are going to be needed, that any tree planting we do, any upland peat restoration we do, is of great biodiversity benefit as well, and also things like flood alleviation, which is in our wider, in our near vicinity, Kirklees, Calderdale especially, where this has become an increasing risk because of the effects of the climate change that's happened to us.
Thank you. I'll pass it on to Bethany for the final.
Thank you so much, everybody, for your time today. It's really great to hear what's going on campus, and I look forward to hearing your plans put into action. So we're just going to kick off our live Q&A session with one of the questions pre-submitted in the last few days. Tim, we will come to you first. How is the university planning to address its carbon emissions from air travel?
Thanks, Bethany. For an international university where international connections are important to our ability to make a positive difference to the carbon agenda and to support wider development goals, this is clearly a major challenge. We can't simply raise the drawbridge and prevent our students and staff from travelling. That said, we have to address this question very seriously. It's obviously part of our commitment on Scope 3 carbon neutrality, which I mentioned just a minute or two ago. We are beginning a process of reviewing our travel policy. It'll be presented in draft options to the next climate emergency steering group, and then it'll be considered at the relevant university committees subsequent to that. I'm pleased to say that that consideration is already being supported by very significant investment in digital collaboration and communication tools, which are essentially alternatives to that air travel which the university has been so extensively involved in. I think it's fair to say too, I think colleagues will be aware of this, students will be aware of this, we've made huge strides in that technology around digital collaboration and communication over the last year. We've had to, but we really have risen to that challenge. We've shown what's possible by way of the alternatives to air travel. We are in the course of a major investment in the university's telecoms infrastructure. We're in the midst of it's over £1 million investment in the university's telecom solutions. That was authorised by the University Council because of the scale of the university's investment there. That includes in the very near future the rollout of Teams Voice as a solution. And we do continue to look for the real alternatives to travel. And it obviously doesn't just include air travel, it's other forms of carbon impacting travel elsewhere where those are possible. And then, of course, where travel is unavoidable, the university is looking at the offsetting solutions which we want to make relevant, as I've already said in my introductory comments, and which I think are going to be the subject of other questions which I'll leave perhaps to expand on later. But that I hope is an indication of the seriousness which we're addressing the air travel question with. Thank you.
Our next question is for Patrick. Patrick, how might the enhanced biodiversity look like on campus, and how will this be achieved?
Thanks, Adrtayo. So to enhance the biodiversity on campus, we're proposing a couple of actions. One of them is to undertake some survey work to assess what we actually already have, and then to develop a management plan to deliver any benefits we wish to gain out of there. Part of this surveying will be also to look at where we've got biodiversity deserts, so places like where we've got amenity planting that was done a number of years ago purely for aesthetic purposes, but actually don't hold any benefit for the wider area. The planting we've been doing recently with new developments like Barbara Hepworth and Joseph Priestley East, we've been focusing on using attractive but beneficial planting, native species, insect encouraging species, bee encouraging species to improve the biodiversity performance on campus. We'll also look to how we can link up with the wider area through the river corridors and through the canal corridor as well, of which we sit, on how we can again make links in terms of improving biodiversity. Further to that as well, we can look to develop stronger ties with local environmental groups who are working on our doorstep and have got a long history of working in Kirklees.
Brilliant, thank you so much. I have a question for both Jane and Phil. Are there any plans for new research centres departments, or expertise to monitor and oversee progress towards achieving the net zero strategy?
Thank you, Bethany. Of course, I mean, one of the things that happened at the university very recently is that we've reintroduced the geography department, and Phil sat here is a testament to that. And obviously the work that Phil is doing on the Arctic ice is obviously really relevant in this context. I think it's quite important though, when you think about our sort of 10-point plan, that actually you have to evaluate what you're doing. It's not sufficient to say we have this project and that project and everything else. Now we do that at the level of the work that Patrick does with the states, and we look at energy usage and all those different metrics and measurements that we can have. But also we have to do it on a more global scale, and that involves lots of different aspects across the campus and involves lots of work in all sorts of different schools. You know, it's not just the science side of this. There's the society changes that are necessary. There's the cultural changes that are necessary, and this sort of action will require interaction across all of the different schools on campus. Perhaps if I hand over to Phil now, he could maybe talk a little bit more about the research side.
Thank you for the question. And actually, it's my understanding that university is gathering the information on the research, contributing to the carbon neutral. So it goes all across the university research steps and then teaching step. So, and for myself, actually, I'm carrying on the project in African countries, in Ethiopia and Malawi. So all about the improving the sustainability for the in that countries. So yeah, and at the same time, we're also working hard, working together with the local communities. And then, for example, for myself, working with the Home Valley Climate Action Partnership and try to work out the land use with the farmers to improve the carbon emissions and carbon capturing through the land use change, things like that. Yeah.
Thank you, Phil and Jane. My next question is for Patrick, just to exploit more from Jane's and Phil's comment on the Joseph Priestley building. Patrick, what plans are there for improving energy and sustainability targets in other buildings? And how do you expect to get building users to adapt to new practices to improve energy efficiency in Joseph Priestley, as an example?
Okay, thank you for that. So for those who don't know, so the Joseph Priestley building, it's actually a collection of 3 different buildings all interlinked, but they form the home of the Applied Sciences department. Applied Sciences has the largest carbon footprint in the university through the nature of their work. They've got a number of things like fume cupboards, scientific equipment, and undertake research as well. The challenge with buildings like that is, so for example, the oldest section of Joseph Priestley is a 1930 constructed building that has been altered massively throughout the years. We need to take an assessment of that building to understand how we can adapt it to work for the future whilst keeping the benefit of having a historic building for Huddersfield there. We have that issue with a number of buildings on campus, including Ramsden next door to it, the first educational building that was constructed on what is now the Huddersfield campus. We've got a number of deconsecrated churches, and we've got a number of mills as well. And most of these were refurbished over 20 years ago originally, so we've got a lot of work to do there. Beyond that, and the question sort of reached into behaviour as well. There's certain things we need to do to look at, say, activities in there. One of them is to look at, say, what the current practices are in there and look at new procedures. Others are to see what we can change in the background, so people can still conduct their work efficiently, but they can make improvements without even realizing it. if I can hand over to Jane as well as the former Dean of School, she might be able to provide some insight as well.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Joseph Priestley is a strange mixture, as Patrick's just alluded to, between the old and the new. And the new that was designed specifically for energy efficiency, and the old that of course wasn't. I think within the old section of the building, there's obviously work that we can do on the infrastructure, but there's also a lot around the culture. You know, things like fume cupboard usage, things like switching things off, which is all things that we can do on a routine basis. So it's not just around the work that we can do, the expensive work on infrastructure. It's also around changing hearts and minds and education of staff and students so that they can change practices and help with this large agenda. Thank you.
So we're now going to go back to the Slido results and have a look at your contributions. These on the screen. Brilliant. It's really great that you feel that the university is setting ambitious goals, inspiring as well. That's a really great word to hear. Yeah, really feeling really positive words.
Hi everyone, my name's Thomas Smith and I'm a Senior Lecturer in Physical Geography here at the University of Huddersfield. Sustainability is made up of three key strands: us as people, the environment and the economy. My research predominantly focuses on the environment and particularly about what's happening at the coast. My research focuses on how we can maintain our coast as a sustainable buffer to protect us from coastal erosion in the future, how we can maximise its biodiversity, and how we as people can also sustainably use it as an important area for recreation. This multifaceted approach to sustainability and the way we investigate it is contained with all of our environmental and geography degrees here at the University of Huddersfield, and it's something that you study right from your very first day to within your dissertation or research project as well.
My name is Morven McEachern. I'm Professor of Sustainability and Ethics in the Huddersfield Business School. My research area revolves around two key sustainable development goals. The first of which is responsible management, production and consumption, which is Sustainable Development Goal number 12. I've focused on a variety of sectors, mainly food and clothing and jewellery, and within those sectors looking at producers, the supply chains that are involved, and how we consume certain goods and how we can become more sustainable in terms of our consumption practices. So one paper in particular is in the Journal of Consumer Policy, where we looked at how we might persuade consumers to reuse clothing to avoid waste, to avoid overconsumption, and we looked at different behavioural change models to help encourage that behavioural change. So another of the Sustainable Development Goals is number 2, which is no hunger. Much of the food waste gets thrown away, and we looked at some production models that look to pass on that food that would normally be wasted and have it reused in other forms. So we were particularly interested in food banks and also social supermarkets that also took waste products that had been wrongly labelled or had an additional ingredient added which didn't alter the taste, but manufacturers were not willing to sell these products on. So these are the two key areas of my research. Both of them link very strongly to the teaching that I do, which is mainly final year undergraduate, and the title of the module is Business Responsibility and Sustainability. And the Sustainable Development Goals are linked throughout the whole module all year long. So if you're interested in learning a bit more, have a look at my web profile page on Huddersfield Business School.
Hi, my name's Sam Hudson-Miles. I'm the course leader for the BA Honours Fashion Design Suite at the University of Huddersfield. I'm going to give you a really quick whistle-stop tour of how we embed sustainable fashion design practice into our course. The first thing is really about raising awareness with students. What is sustainable design practice? What is sustainable sourcing? What is sustainable production? And a lot of students are actually already using some of these methods without perhaps realising that they are sustainable. One example of this is the use of dead stock fabrics. Dead stock really, in the sense of fabrics, are those fabrics that have been overproduced, so they're surplus to requirements, and or they may be slight seconds. So these are often sent to fabric outlets, for example, and sold at a discounted price. Now, we are very lucky to have a great fabric store such as this in Dewsbury called Fabworks, and this is where a lot of our students go to find project fabric. But they don't realise that all that fabric is dead stock, often coming from places like the Burberry factory in Castleford. So all pretty high-end stuff. So they'll use this fabric, it's dead stock, it's what a lot of designers use in the industry to address the sustainability agenda, especially the smaller brands, the emergent brands. So that's an excellent way to show students how they are or can be sustainable. In terms of embedding it even further, we write into every single project brief a section whereby students have to respond to one or more elements of sustainable design and or production practice in relation to the brief. In first and second year, this is somewhat led by the brief itself, so it's within a specific context. However, when a student reaches final year, they are working in a much more self-directed way. And so we're starting to see some really, really exciting methods of sustainability coming through from our final year students as we speak. And especially because we're in the middle of another lockdown, so they're having to be incredibly resourceful. Now, hopefully we'll be able to share some of this work with you come the summer through our graduate showcases and through our course Instagram page.
I'll now hand over to Adrtayo to make his closing remarks.
Thank you, Bethany. And thank you to all our panel members that joined us this evening to answer all the questions that both students and staff have asked. Also, I'd like to say thank you to all the delegates that have attended this conference this evening. Thank you all very much indeed for giving us your time and joining us tonight. I'll pass it back to Bethany.
Thank you so much, everybody, for attending today, and to our panellists for answering some fantastic and interesting questions. It's really fantastic to see the university taking a strong stance on the climate emergency issue. So one thing I just wanted to promote for Green Week, if you're a student, I'm doing sustainability swaps giveaways all week on my Instagram profile, which is @CommunityHudSU. So if you'd like some freebies, such as a solid shampoo bar or a reusable sandwich wraps, please head over there, and you never know, you might make a permanent sustainable swap. So I'll hand over to Tim to make his final remarks.
Thank you, Bethany. All that remains to be said, I think, is to thank everybody who's contributed to this process so far. It is a very important commitment that the university has made. I do want to acknowledge in particular the contribution that our student body has made, is making, and will make to this journey that the university is embarked upon. I want to thank everybody who's made this evening's event possible, and in particular all of the audience who've joined us, and wish everybody well for the remainder of this very promising Green Week. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.